Welcome to Her Life Unscripted podcast, inspiring burnt out, stressed out, and stretched thin women to embrace the unscriptedness of life. Hosted by Anna Osborne.
Hello, ladies, and welcome to Her Life Unscripted episode 39. It is great to be here with all of you on this January morning. As you guys know, we are in the middle of a wellness series here, which I know is totally cliche, but you know what? It's just what we're doing here in 2017. We're just diving into the clichéness. I really enjoy kind of moving over to have themes each month that the show circles around. And obviously with the new year, there's so much talk about wellness and all those sorts of things, which I think is absolutely fantastic. But it's also something that is really played out. And so our attempt is to be able to look at wellness, this idea of wellness from the tops of our heads to the bottom of our toes from just really different angles. And I just enjoyed the interviews that I did during this month, and I'm excited to share them with you guys. But today is going to be just me. It is a solo show. And I had fun with reading your guys' reactions from our Balance is BS episode, which kicked us off the first week of January. There were some of you guys that were like, heck yeah, like Balance is BS. Throw it out. It's just it's a wolf in sheep's clothing. It's perfection wrapped up as some, thing that we were supposed to want. And there was those of you guys that thought, you know what, balance is actually a really healthy thing for me. It allows me to stay grounded. And so I was very appreciative for those of you that shared that perspective and just kind of the conversations that we have about it. I do believe that it's important for us to have things that ground us. And like I've shared, balance is not one of those things that grounds me. Being intentional and very mindful with my actions is something that I really use to ground, but it was interesting to hear how you guys use the idea of balance as something to ground you. So thank you for those of you that agreed and those of you that disagreed. It is always just a pleasure to hear kind of what you think and all those great things. So that is where we are at for the month. I hope you guys are, moving through January in a pretty cool way. It's the third week of January for those of you that are listening in real time. And I always feel like the third week of January is the hardest, which is really weird to say. I get that. But I think it's hard because there are a lot of people that get all on board for New Year's resolutions, right? They're gung-ho, let's resolve to do whatever it is. But unfortunately, what happens is by the third week, they've kind of hit the wall, right? They've gone so full tilt that they are, just exhausted and they can't stick with whatever they resolve to do. So if you are a person that sets a New Year's resolution, that's awesome. My hat is off to you. And I really encourage you to, slow down a bit and kind of reevaluate if you were overzealous with what you told yourself you were going to do. Give yourself a little bit of grace and just slow down and maybe revisit what are some ways to bring a little bit more intentionality or mindfulness into whatever goals it was that you mapped out to do. So that is kind of my words of encouragement for those of you that are feeling a little bit defeated that third week of January, which for some reason, I need to see if there's any research about the third week of January. But for me, it always feels like one that has some snags and things like that. So that is it. I'm excited to talk to you guys about a different aspect of wellness, which is our mindset, right? We talked with Lisa Crilly last week, and we've got Sarah Angelides and coming up next week, and also Tara Whitney will be speaking too. And those are different, they talk about spiritual wellness and physical wellness and those sorts of things. But I feel like our minds are such a part of our wellness plan. And today I want to talk about this idea of mindset. There is this very interesting lady. Her name is Carol Dweck, I believe is her name. I'll post it in the Facebook group, but also the show notes, the spelling of her last name. I'm sure I'm pronouncing it wrong because that's kind of what I do sometimes. Not intentionally, but it just happens. And so what I want to do is be able to share kind of her stuff with you guys because she had this really amazing idea about our mindsets, right? And what happens when we are able to really focus on our mindset from an intentional place and just the kind of the two places that happen within our mindset. And so she wrote this book, and it was kind of this book called Mindset, right? And it was all about the different ways that whether or not we have a growth mindset or a fixed mindset. And I'll try to include the image. It's a little bit difficult, but I'll definitely include it within the show notes so you guys can check it out. Or otherwise, just Google her name, Carol Dweck, D-W-E-C-K. And the name of her book is called Mindset. I'll link that in the show notes. I haven't read it, but I've read some of her research and kind of her philosophies and stuff like that. And it's called Mindset, the New Psychology of Success, how we can learn to fulfill our potential. So it's obviously a growth-oriented book. But what she does is she breaks down this idea of a growth mindset compared to a fixed fixed mindset. And I think when we're talking about this idea of wellness, like this is a really, really cool thing to be able to discuss, because oftentimes we can get really trapped in having a fixed mindset, and it doesn't allow us to move into a place of growth or wellness because these mindsets are so different, right? And so thinking about this idea, and I'll go more into her model, but thinking about our mindsets, right? Like our mindsets shape so many different things. If we tell ourselves that we can, we will. But if we tell ourselves that we can't, we don't. Right? Like I just wrote a blog within my psychotherapy practice about this idea, right? That if we are told over and over that we can't do something, pretty soon we start believing we can't. Right? And that idea, if we're told over and over that we can achieve whatever we set our mind to, you see people that have that mindset have this amazing just success, right? They just crush through goals. And so her whole thing was talking about this idea of a fixed mindset, right? That our intellect is something that is static, right? It doesn't move. And if we believe that, about ourselves, that no matter how hard we try, we're never going to get smarter, we're never going to get stronger, we're never going to get faster, that we have a fixed mindset, right? Say, okay, this is as far as I can get, and that's awesome, but I can't do anything past that. And so what happens is that over time, with that sort of mindset, we start to avoid challenges, right? And that when obstacles present themselves, we give up pretty easily, right? We put effort into things, but we don't really recognize that more effort can make anything change. We feel like the amount of effort we put in is fine, and that it won't really yield any change in effort won't make any difference, right? It's kind of fruitless. And that also when we get feedback, we ignore the stuff that could be really useful, especially if it goes against our mindset, right? And that when we see other people being successful, we really feel threatened by their success because it feels like they're kind of, taking away from what we could achieve because there's only so many pieces of the pie, right? There's a finite ability to have success in this world. And if you see other people having success, that means that it's cutting into your ability also. And so that's kind of how she breaks down this idea of a fixed mindset, right? And that, what happens also is that we can kind of plateau early with that fixed mindset. I think about it in terms of the football quarterback who high school was his glory days, right? I always think about when I meet people and they talk about high school was the best years of their life. Part of me is like, that's awesome, right? That's fantastic. You had the best years of your life. But then the other part of me is curious of a mindset that the best has already happened. Like that, like if you think about like, oh, that's so amazing. You had those best years of your life, whether it was high school or college and, the success you achieved. But if you really believe that the best years of your life have already passed, that to me sounds very, very sad, right? That the ability to change and have things be different is fixed. It is finite. There is no ability to achieve or be more. We've plateaued. Right? So that is kind of, how Carol breaks down this idea of a fixed mindset. And it's truly fascinating, right? Because I know people in my life who maybe I was friends with before, and I kind of realized over time that they had a very fixed mindset, right? That this is the way it's always going to be. Why put effort into change? Every time I try, I just fail or I just get pushed back down. And I have had a hard time connecting with those people because they do have a fixed mindset, right? The ability to try new things and to risk isn't really part of the makeup because they feel like it doesn't really matter. They'll always fail. And so thinking of this idea of wellness, right, is that if we have fixed mindsets, if we believe the best has already happened and that, the only potential we have is the potential that's already occurred, that really does make our overall ability to be achieving wellness something that is kind of over. Right? It's very difficult to achieve an idea of wellness or be intentional with where we place our energy if we feel like the best has already happened. And I also understand that this mindset is a coping mechanism too, right? There are so many challenges that present themselves in life, tragedies, traumas, horrible, horrible things. And it can take the air out of our lungs, right? It can lead us to this belief that it doesn't matter what we do, it'll always be bad. And I hear that and I get that. And I also want to encourage you guys to push up against it, right? My hope for every single one of you is the best hasn't already happened, right? That there's more, right? Whether it's abundance or blessings or cosmic space, right? Whatever you call it, that is in front of you and you have the ability to move into that space. But with a fixed mindset, you will always be in the place that you've been, right? You'll always be in the place that you've been because the belief is that's the best it will ever be, right? And so my challenge is for those of you that feel like, I've struggled with that fixed mindset. I have a hard time risking or pushing myself further because I don't believe that any sort of effort will make a big difference. Like if that's where you find yourself, I want to encourage you guys to kind of listen to the next part of the podcast, right? Which is where we're going to be talking about the other mindset, the growth mindset, and then also some ways to start transitioning over from that fixed to the growth and how we can kind of do that in our day-to-day life. So let's talk about the growth mindset. The growth mindset is something that is very different. Obviously, we're contrasting it against the fixed mindset, but I want to talk about some of the unique characteristics that Carol Dweck points out in terms of this comparison she does between the two mindsets. And so what the belief behind a growth mindset is that intelligence can be developed, right? That there's this desire to learn and achieve more and understand more. And due to that desire, right, that there becomes this tendency towards embracing change and challenges, right? And that even when setbacks happen, that they're still pushed through and persisting past those obstacles. And that, the effort that we put into things, the work that we put into things is this belief that we're working on that path, or we're putting effort in as a way to create mastery of something, right? The more that we practice, the better we're going to get out of it, that our hard work actually pays off. And that actually the criticism that we receive actually helps us learn about ourselves, right? It helps us learn about the ways that we look at the world, the ways that we take the world in, and that it actually allows us to learn and grow rather than to stop us. And then also that we find lessons and inspiration from the success of others, which I think is a really huge thing when we're talking about this kind of month-long idea of wellness, is that there's so many people doing different things in the world, and we can learn great things from their success without letting it railroad our own efforts, right? Like you're always going to find somebody doing something much more amazing than you, right? Like it's just the way that it is, walk all around the block looks not much compared to somebody who ran a marathon that day, right? But seeing their success and their dedication to hard work can actually inspire me to go around the block 2 times, right? Rather than I see their success and that they ran a marathon and I just walked around the block. So what's the point of even doing that? Right. And so that growth mindset, I think, is so imperative to this idea of wellness, whether it's our spiritual wellness, our physical wellness, our emotional wellness, our mental wellness, that we have to have a mindset of growth versus a mindset of fixed in order to achieve that wellness that literally flows throughout our entire body, right? You think of our mind connected to our emotions, to our spirit, to our soul, that in order to have a concept of wellness and an intentionality with which we go about the world, if we have a fixed mindset, we won't even bother going around the world or being curious about how we show up, right? It stops us dead in our tracks. And so when I first, kind of saw this graphic and this thing that she shared, I thought, oh my gosh, it's so fantastic. It's so interesting. But really, as we're talking about this idea of wellness this month, it made me think about the ways that we may not even be aware that we're in our own way, right? I love asking that question of people in a very loving and kind way, but asking them, have you noticed that there's times that you stand in your own way? Or how have you noticed ways that you stood in your own way? And it's amazing the things that people can come up with when there's some time to reflect. And oftentimes, I'd say the gross majority of the times, now that I kind of know about this model of the fix versus the growth mindset, is that most of the time when people share about the ways they've stood in their own way, it's because they've adopted a fixed mindset somewhere along the way. It doesn't mean that that's how they view everything in the world, but given the situation that they're struggling with, that it tends to be a fixed mindset that is keeping them stuck. And so I really wanted to highlight that today as we're talking in order to really challenge you guys to be looking at your mindset, right? Are there ways that you shrink from challenges and you believe that effort you put into things really won't transform into something amazing? Like what happens for you when you do that? And what would it be like to use feedback as a way to grow and learn about yourself? What would it be like to be inspired by others and see the amazing things they're doing and using that as inspiration to continue on your path too? That to me seems like the definition of wellness, right? That when we are accepting exactly where we are and using that as a place to grow from rather than a place to just crumble, like that's a powerful thing. So that is really kind of the idea I want to share with you guys today. And I want to hear your feedback. What situations have presented in your life that have made it hard to have a growth mindset? Is it relationships that tend to keep that fixed mindset? Is it, interactions with family? Is it work goals? Is it weight loss? Like what is this thing that you have such a fixed mindset about? And how is that preventing you from moving? How is that getting you stuck in your own way? And how does a shift to a growth mindset really allow for a place of acceptance and much more of that total wellness, right? From the top of our heads to the tips of our toes wellness, so that we're able to grow in the places that we're at and not settle in and realize or think that we have no way to change. So that is my challenge to all of you. I do encourage you guys to reach out via the SpeakPipe app or to Anna@herlifeunscripted.com. You can send me an email. I would love to hear your thoughts, feelings, reactions as we talk about this, because I think it's such a powerful idea to recognize that we actually have control over our mindset, and it's not something that has to stay fixed forever. We can actually transition to a growth mindset. So I am going to be diving into Carol's book, and I will definitely share with you guys as I dive more into it. But I'll share the graphic also in the show notes so you can take a look at it, because it's just quite amazing. So thank you so much, all of you, for tuning in. And I encourage you to challenge yourself and your mindset to see how it is that you see the world. I look forward to talking to you all soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Want to learn about the latest retreats, workshops, and speaking events hosted by Anna? Head over to herlifeunscripted.com to get in on all the juicy details. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast so we can continue to grow our amazing audience. Lastly, be sure and send in your voice feedback via the SpeakPipe app or to Anna@herlifeunscripted.com. We can't wait to hear from you.